for SK to pick it up here. Trying to walk through the smoke, but it's just not going to happen. SK Gaming, second major championship in a row. They are your winners.
Despite Fnatic's best efforts, it goes the distance. It goes all 3 maps. And we have our champions, the best team in the world, Ninjas in Pajamas.
Red touching the bomb, are they going to peek? Holding it now, and there is it. It's just out to Flamey. It's not going to happen. Astralis have won the face at London Main. There's no time! He just has to watch that clock tick down! This is it! Na'Vi have taken the major!
Now we go down to the other part of the bracket, and we're going to talk more about French Counter-Strike, guys, and an interesting one. I know, right? Because 2014 LDLC, right? As in the one that won the major. Yeah, the Dream major. Yeah, well, I mean, crazy circumstances, as I'm sure we'll get to. Again, NBK, Smiths, Kiyashima, Shots.
Olof's so good, he wins other people majors.
Yeah, no.
Fucks around and wins other people majors.
And on the other side.
Sort of true.
Yeah, it is kind of true. On the other side, obviously, we've got FaZe Clan, the 2018 super team.
Ooh, this is a fucking brutal one, mate.
Yeah.
This is actually lined up mad. Another mad contrast. These are like the two crazy freeform fragging style, Oh, and the 4 spy squads. This is a good one.
Yeah, well, this is the one. I remember when we finished recording the last session. This is the one where I was like, I'm coming into it, and I don't. I think I might know which way I'm going to go.
On that one, I feel
but I reckon some of you guys will have some stuff to persuade us. So I'm going to start with Chad here. We'll talk about 2014 LDLC. So obviously, I've read out the lineup there. It probably doesn't sound that impressive these days to like the modern ear, but you know, you've still got the Shocks and Smiths duo back when Smiths was still producing. This is peak. Well, maybe not peak MBK, but. Maybe as well. I think MBK was still.
This is when he became a supportive player. He
exactly.
Really
He
really
changed his role a little bit. Obviously, Happy was a lurking, fragging IGL, and Kiyashima probably better at this period of time than people remember. But as I said, I'll start with you, Chad. Tell me about why this LDLC team made the cut for Time Travel LAN.
Look, I think we just have to remember but it's a fond time for many betas out there. I'm sure the likes of BlameF would have loved this period of time where you could be the in-game leader and send your team onto the other side of the map and actually win. Because
he means beta as in someone that baits for kills, not a beta as in a beta male. Because he'll fuck your shit up, Chad. He's massive.
Or a master beta.
Right?
Yeah, all that. Just want to make that clear. Anyway,
fair enough.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, no, good there. Look, this is with Happy as the in-game leader of this team, right?
He's not fuck Chad shit up. He's just giving his opinions. Just commentator on that.
I feel like we're going to have a Will Smith, Chris Rock situation.
I know exactly. Of all the things, you're not even saying something outrageous.
Style out your fucking mouth.
Exactly. All I was doing was just calling around myself. Get your fucking.
I was trying to help the Zoomers, the new viewers understand the type of player we're dealing with here. Happy would be when Happy was located on one side of the map, you knew what the fuck was going on, right? Like this guy in the way that he led, it's crazy that it worked, but. I think one of the keys here with this team was the fact that the 4 spy meta of Tech9s, like Tech9's back here, especially on Cache, like you would do connector smoke, you would flash over top mid, you'd boost over, and these Tech9s would just run straight up speedway. They'd just do A executes. This was when that was at peak, and it was just constant back and forth of this type of nonsense. And the LDLC boys were just brawlers, right? Because that's what they do. They just have so many players. I always remember like Keo with the deagle in his hand. This team they definitely weren't playing strategically the most beautiful style of Counter-Strike, but they were playing a style of Counter-Strike which worked for them very well, right? Like I don't know how Happy was able to pull it off with such consistency, because I look back on how I hated playing against this team. I think I played against an LDLC version earlier in the year, the one with maybe Maniac still on the roster. Right. But I don't think I ever got to play against this version of the team. until the following year. And I don't know if when they became envious with Hastro and all that kind of shit, right? That's
became envious after they won the MLG. So it would
as
be
MLGX games.
Yeah, so it'd be like February 2015. So I think you would have played them as Envy when you were at the LAN where you and JKS went to the Gfinity and you had the.
That's the one. Yeah. Okay.
I assume you played them there.
And by the way, even though we put 2014 LDLC, obviously we'll include that 2015. You know, it was the start of the year. It was January. We'll include that 2015 X Games in the consideration for this.
Yes. Even if they change Orky means, as long as it's the same 5 players.
Yeah. There's obviously a bit of the controversy around this team, right? With the DreamHack event. I wasn't there. I didn't get all the fanfare. I was like, in a different time zone in Australia when all of this crazy business was going on, and trying to stay awake and understand what was happening back then. It probably wasn't the easiest of situations, but. That's one there that obviously it's not really a red flag, is it? It's just one of the biggest controversies in live Counter-Strike I think we've probably ever had. I don't know what would even stack up against the whole Olofboost situation. But didn't they use a boost themselves in that same
every team was using a boost that was actually like a textured boost. Every team at the event was using a boost that would get them to qualified.
But you are right.
Popular boost at the time.
Fnatic themselves, LDLC themselves on their CT side in the same spot did a slightly not as good boost that you could sort of see, like, I'm going to say, like, it was like 70% of the height of the other boost. So you could still see, actually, interestingly, the same texture, which is why, by the way, without getting into it, the actual resolution of that particular match of like it would be restarted halfway through never made any sense to me, because like either we just do the game over because everyone's using bogs that turn out to be illegal, or we're in some weird area where it's like, how many rounds do you take on? So that whole thing, unfortunately, like, that was very scuffed.
Can we take a moment and just talk about Boostgate? Because I want to take a temperature check on where everyone was at with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I was at the event working as a journalist. I wasn't broadcast talent for that one. And so I don't know if I had a different perspective to everyone, but I remember writing an article at the time where I said, like, Fnatic have got no one but themselves to blame for being hated for Boostgate. It was something like that. And then the premise of the opinion piece was basically that, keep in mind, Fnatic had obviously, there'd been some little implications about maybe some of their players, and some of the legitimacy rumors were already beginning to swirl. And then on top of that, they were a Swedish team in a Swedish tournament that they knew the admins, then they had players that could back channel, and obviously they were duplicitous in hiding the bug. Remember, some guy found it, JW and a Fnatic manager found the YouTube video of the bug. It was unlisted. It obviously been shared around in private forums, and they told the guy, delete the video. That's where the meme comes from, if anyone knows. Fnatic manager here, delete this video. And then they chose to, rather than tell Valve about this, so it could be patched out, or tell other teams so everyone could use it, they chose to keep it to themselves. Now, for me, I was always of the opinion that Fnatic massively fucked up with that, and what Fnatic did was bad, and that the hate that they received from the community was sort of well placed in a way, because there was no need for any of that circus to happen. It was in Fnatic's power to stop it. Now, when I look at the community's feelings, they don't feel that way. They feel Fnatic were hard done by. It was a massive overreaction. It was a witch hunt. The French players were like crying and made a big deal about it. So I wanted to get what you guys thought, because I don't think we're aligned. I think we differ on this.
I remember at the time it happened, I was watching live, and it's one of the things that it was very early on in my social media presence, and I think it's one of the things I regret, was that I was very anti-Fnatic watching it. And I think as time went on, as like I slept on it the next day, I remember just being like, man, I actually thought Fnatic got screwed there. And I think a lot of it came down to, as you mentioned, Fnatic had some of those accusations flying around and some of that environment about them. They also had the incident with NIP where they weren't shaking hands. They were already pretty well hated by the community, which I think helped make this like get it to like a critical point. But if I look at it as like the perspective of just like a gamer or myself, if I was a player, what else would you do if you were coming to an event of this stature to win a world championship and you had what you thought was like an event-winning strategy? And I think it's important, when I interviewed them for the Room on Fire Boostgate episode, they did just essentially say, like, we didn't think this was anything cheating. We didn't think this was anything wrong. We just thought we had like a winning strategy. Like, when is there ever in the history of Counter-Strike been like some, like, you know, if you can pull off this boost here in this corner, you're going to go do it. If you can use this nade, you can do it in the server. And I think at the time in Counter-Strike as well, obviously all the rules and the professionalism around different situations hadn't been established. So I think they were pretty hard done by. I think it was a little bit unreasonable. I do think, you know, I think what happened afterwards in the chaos is probably subject of maybe its own fucking own video about like how the conversation occurred with Games, with LDLC, with Fnatic, with the DreamHack admins. I'm sure there was a lot of fucking in those kind of conversations going back and forth.
I'll tell you some stories about that in a second because I was there. So.
Yeah, but I think Fnatic as players and as a team and as individuals, I really didn't have any issues with anything that they did throughout that. Even messaging the guy and asking him to take on the YouTube video. Of course you would. Of course you'd be like, yeah, we have this. Like, let's not spread it. Like, take it down. You know, I was fine with everything they did.
I get what you're saying with that point there, Jason. I think like it's just was so early within CSGO, right? Like there's still even like bugs today that people find, and obviously there's a different view on it now, right? But I just want to throw this into the ring here because when I had Khan on to have a bit of a chit chat about why his team's a mess.
Are you getting a little bit of respect, maybe just a smidge?
No, we learned why the team's a mess, I think. Okay. But when I had him on, we were talking about that for a moment, and he mentioned that if it was NIP in their position, right, instead of Fnatic, right, and with Forest and Get Right, some of the most loved people in the community at the time, how would that have been received then? Would they have been put in the same position as Fnatic? Was it just the shine that the team had on them as to why they got such backlash, why there was such a swell immediately, right? Because it wasn't like even put up for consideration. It was almost just like lynch them. Like it just felt like instant. It was just like, yeah, fuck these guys. Like they should be disqualified. And like this is at like the World Cup of Counter-Strike, and like this is happening at Fever Pitch. Like it seems pretty wild when you look back on it. The thing is, I think that out of all of the teams, and this is where it's a little bit unfair to them, I guess, but having that history that they had, like then going and doing something on top of that, they were either playing the heel super well, right? Like they're just like, fuck it, you know, whatever. Like people can take whatever we do, however they want. We just don't give a fuck. Like that could have been truly like the stance. Or if there was a little bit of, oh, we're already getting accused of this, that, and the other, doing something like this that could be considered dodgy, probably not going to help our case. When it comes to winning, right now, that's where we get into fun drawing of lines, right? But when it comes to that, and they're thinking, what can we do to win a major or win another major, right? Like I can see why they didn't, you know, alert the authorities to this beforehand. But yeah, I don't know. Like I have that same issue as when we spoke about the Flusher situation last time round. That I have a little bit of a closer relationship with the team, even though this was a different looking roster. I still had a closer relationship with the team because of all the like 2013 stuff where we were like boot camping with them and traveling with them and whatnot. So I still had like my Fnatic fanboy kind of situation going on. So for me, I always just default thought that they were in a rougher spot, right? But I don't know. I haven't really sat and weighed too long on this one, so I'm in the middle. Like I think that I can understand why they got roasted. We see it happen every second week, right? There's someone who's the flavor of the month to be hated, and these guys were definitely that.
They're flavor of every month of the time.
Yeah.
I'll let everyone else go first there, because I was pretty sure I was the only one. I'm basically the only person, as far as I can tell, who's almost entirely on Fnatic's side and expressly against LDLC, and here's why. So I'll start with actually the experience of watching the game. So I was there working the major, and if people don't remember, this was the third map of the series. The map was Overpass. This is the old version of Overpass before it was reworked. It was a very CT-sided map. It was the one where, if you don't know, on the A-bomb site, you can just stay in the A-bomb site, and that's how you defend that site. You don't ever even have to go out of the map. So it was, even if people don't know, it was actually the map, interestingly, LDLC won the tournament on in the final in a close game, right? On this game, at the time, you have to understand, they've never beaten the Fnatic lineup with their team. They've just lost a bunch of times to this Fnatic team, and they're the clear number 2 team in the world. So you're in the major. By the way, if people don't even know, Fnatic did, like, the very games get BO1 upset by Hellraisers. That's why so if you're LDLC, let's just frame it like this. You're playing the team that beats you every time, the number 1 team in the world. You're number 2 in the world. You did your job and won your group, but you get to play them in the quarterfinals of the major. You're about to look like a dickhead and come 5th to 8th the major, and you've done nothing wrong. On top of that, everyone for 3 weeks has been speculating that Flusher and or 2 other members of Fnatic literally use wall hacks, and that's why they win every clutch. So now the sentiment when this match happens and this match turns absolutely on its head, because this is the other key thing to understand. At the moment in the game, because Fnatic lost the pistol, the game is over. They are going to lose. They are down something like 3-13. Yes, on a CT-sided map, but you need a perfect CT roll. And you're going to start with a force buy. That's why they bought the Scout. You're going to be on pistols. Basically, at that point, in functional terms, LDLC's done it. You've actually got over the hump. You've basically won finally against your rival. It's all legit. It's all great. So here's what happens if you're a fan. I remember initially thinking, this is amazing. Fnatic are geniuses. They actually have kept a secret strat to when they actually are going to for real lose. They've pulled it out. And by the way, I didn't even think it should have worked as well as it did. I thought after like 3 rounds, this is going to be the new try. So the fact it never was, I also think is on LDLC. I think it's the fact it was a major. It's the man. Like I say, you feel like you're at the finish line. I think some of that got in there head. So my problem is this. Initially, I just thought that's genius. Look, it's unorthodox, but how else could they have won this game? So here's my problem. I actually think the circumstances of all the other things I mentioned, that context is what made it seem so bad. It's why it felt wrong. Because here was what the vibe was if you were a neutral observer. Wait a minute. So Fnatic beats them every time normally, and they might even be actually wall hacking. And then the one time LDLC gets them, and they actually have them in the crosshairs. These motherfuckers pull out an illegal boost. Just because they're that dirty, they have to win. How disgusting. That's the vibe. That was the vibe everyone had.
That was the community vibe,
sure. I get why it was. In fact, if people don't know, the Swedish part even plays against them. Because I agree, in raw sense, I'd be really worried about Swedish admins dealing with the Swedish team. Spoiler, NIP was Sweden's favourite team. And in fact, the sentiment when those cheating accusations came out was that's the only reason NIP isn't number 1. These motherfuckers cheated against them. Because remember, on the Fnatic side, you had all these brand new players who were at the top. And then on the LDLC side, you had the whole like Kiyashima thing. So it was like, wait a minute, did these teams just overtake NIP by cheating? And did they not actually get displaced? That was the real sentiment by the hardcore fans, just like the typical casual fan. So then you have to add in the context. Here's the problem though. When I look at each individual item of it, that all falls away. And a lot of that like initial emotion just dissipates. I'll give you an example. Yeah. We've already mentioned it. Right, Fnatic themselves used just a worse version of this bug. No, LDLC, sorry. LDLC used a worse version of this bug. Now, boys, did LDLC show Valve that boost and say, is this all right for the major? Did they fuck? But that's what everyone tells me, including LDLC players, is why this boost's illegal. Because if it was too good, here's the real problem the boost has, guys. This is another issue. So not only did Fnatic and all the other teams, and LDLC, all the other teams using their worst version of the bug, not tell Valve. Spoiler, that bug that LDLC used was illegal. That was an illegal bug they used in a match. Yep, and when did they use it, guys? Third map to try and win. Same scenario. See, this is why it doesn't work, boys. Like, they're the piece of shit now. So then here's the other angle, right? When they then actually did that whole thing, so there's the other angle. I agree with your characterization, but not the way fans do. You're right, Richard. Asking the person to delete the video shows you our duplicity. It shows I'm trying to hide that this exists. Here's my problem with that whole topic. That's not illegal. I'm allowed you to just ask it. So I've always thought that part was weird because people act as though like, and then they made a guy take. No, they just asked him to. They just asked him to because he had a vlog. And then here's the other thing, by the way. Why does no one mention that? It's just out there on random YouTube accounts. Y'all are all acting like they did fucking cold fishing or something, mate. Like they cracked the air bomb and then they kept it secret because they... No, this apparently just on YouTube, mate. There was even people, I don't know if you know this, there are pro players, I think exists, Nick might have told me this. There were pro players who told me, I've even seen that bug before. I've seen it in scrims. It's happened before. So the whole thing, this is the problem. It's because in the moment, you have to remember, because the game didn't end, there was no victor actually initially done because we didn't know what was happening. Is it a Fnatic won? Are we replaying it? It meant that there was this crazy 12-hour sort of pressure cooker thing where the admins make the decision, and all of these things were circling around.
They did play out the game initially, though, right? It was 16-13, wasn't it?
No, they didn't play.
It was never played again.
It's deleted.
Yes.
They didn't. So the way that I was told
okay.
that it occurred is that those 12 hours that Duncan just referenced was essentially DreamHack scrambling to find. I don't know if this is actually true. I'll say that it was scrambling to find a way to also be able to disqualify LDLC or find some bug that they did that they could punish them for, so that they could say replay the game. Yeah,
I was doing my rat fuck journalist piece of shit antics back then, right? So I was following them because what was really interesting was like where the admins were based. You had the press room. If anyone has been to DreamHack press room, you know it was quite big. It was pretty opulent by press room standards, but it wasn't far from the admin thing. And obviously, one of the reasons why the game isn't so fresh in my memory compared to you dudes is because I was in the press room kind of watching it on a tiny little fucking screen or a laptop or some shit, trying to keep up with it while I was typing up all of my work. Because you're not expecting it to be this huge historical eventful thing. So while I'm up there, I'm trying to remember the order it went. But first the French went, right? And they were having a good old fucking mardy ass cry about it, as you can imagine, right? I mean, I always forget who their coach was at the time. But
no, it was the other guy.
The penguin hat. Do with a penguin hat. Or the manager, I guess that'd be.
Someone else,
the manager dude. So anyway, but I mean, like, trust me, they were accosted by the players. I mean, the players were absolutely outraged. Like, NBK's not a dude to get angry. He was fucking livid. I mean, he was tamping, and the admins were being like absolutely mobbed. It was a bit of a scene actually, from the French guys. I'll also add, the initial response from DreamHack was all over the place. The admins initially told LDLC, there's not really anything we can do about it, and then they went and looked at the rule book and they were like, and LDLC self-incriminated a little bit because they were like, no, you've got a rule on pixel boosting. And then an admin looked at the demo, saw that they'd used the pixel boost, just a less effective pixel boost, and said, well, you've used one. So two wrongs cancel each other out. Or, so
make it right.
Yeah. And so they started fucking, I mean, there was literal fucking tears. I mean, tears from the French. Now, next up, right, the Swedes come in saying, well, what the fuck have we done wrong? I think Khan was up there, like, saying to them, and Devil Walk was the coach at the time, I think. And they were all up there, basically getting all up in their grill. And DreamHack didn't know what to do. Like, our old friend fucking Hellspawn was part of it. And they said, like, listen, we're just going to have to fucking sleep on this and, like, pull through all of the fucking, all of the rules, everything we're going to do. I also believe they did back channel a Valve to kind of seek advice and, like, will you back us on whatever decision we make kind of thing. And so basically, you had this period where the French players and the Swedish players didn't know which way it was going to go. It was all up in the air. And the French players then went and started chipping away at Fnatic, knowing they were hated, using their fucking social media. And so now you've got a period where the mob comes out. And Fnatic were like, what the fuck, Now, back to the admins. The admins were like, if we put Fnatic through without a good reason, our whole tournament's undercut. We might never get another major again. It'll be a farce. It'll be ridicule. But equally, they sort of did feel on the surface that Fnatic have to go through initially. So that was their original stance. And I think you're right, Jason. I think your characterization's fair. They were going through all of the rules to try and find a way that either the offenses cancelled each other out or Fnatic's could be explained away. Then I think they were going to replay the game. That's where they ended up at by the end. They said, we're just going to replay the map.
Yeah, Fnatic forfeited.
Yeah, but then what happened was this is the mad thing, and I've never seen this in all my life.
And this is so hilarious if you think of the stereotypes of the countries. Just get ready.
Yeah,
go on.
Yeah. So LDLC, hearing they were going to have to replay the map, was so outraged at that prospect of getting a do-over, they said, right, fuck it, we're going to forfeit. So to keep the community pressure on Fnatic, so we keep our standing, and yes, we won't be in the tournament anymore, but it will be a completely illegitimate win for Fnatic. The way they framed it to me when I talked to them about it was they weren't being malicious or vindictive. It was just they were mentally broken. They were done. They didn't feel like they could replay that game and win.
Not enough to win the whole event.
I think both teams probably felt that way.
Yeah, and then so when Fnatic heard LDLC were going to forfeit, they literally ran. They sprinted to the admins to get their forfeit in first.
Jesus. But VR reasons, obviously, optics and that, yeah.
Because they realised optically, if LDLC pulled out, the pressure cooker of hatred they'd already received would have been like nothing else, that it would effectively make them illegitimate in the scene. Now, I remember, by the way, prior to them forfeiting, JW, Flusher, those guys, they were devastated, mate. They were fucking in tears. I think they honestly felt that this was a major they could have won. They could go all the way. They really didn't understand what they'd done wrong. They were like all hugging each other, blubbering. It was a fucking mess. Even like the more stoic people, like Crims was furious, of course, and Olaf was Olaf was going to retire.
Yeah, I talked to him at the end of 2014. That was like right when I started getting into international events and commentating, and he just straight up was just like, "Yep." Like there were like 2 or 3 of us who just thought about just quitting everything.
I think Flusher was the other one. I think Flusher was thinking about it because obviously he already had a target on his back. So
do you think?
I've never seen anything like. I was just gonna say I've never seen anything like that, and I've got to say I think that element of it, the secondary element, is a little bit pathetic. You know, but I'm still unmoved. I still blame Fnatic in my brain. I think what it doesn't move the dial for me. So sorry, what were you going to
say? 2 more points I want to make. One is this. Here's my biggest problem, and the reason why the whole thing that you just said about the duplicitous nature and like hiding it, that doesn't work, because the joke is this: when you actually go and look at what the rule book said and what the ruling was against Fnatic, it's not for what the boost even does.
No.
The ruling is that you can, through being boosted so high up on that bomb site, because it's an elevated area of overpass A bomb site CT, you can see a texture. It's around, I think, the CT spawn area. Now, it's just illegal. This is just in the rule book. You're not allowed to look into like hidden textures basically for other reasons. I don't know what it can really do, but like there's other scenarios where it could be abused. The problem is in this case it doesn't actually gain you advantage. The advantage is seeing over that wall into the water area, and seeing them come out of the spawn if they're going towards the B site. That's the advantage. Secondly, as you said, the initial claim was it's a pixel boost. What it turned out was A, pixel boosts weren't illegal at that DreamHack, and B, essentially everyone was using this type of boost anyway, as you say, so also wouldn't have worked as a So my problem is this: the real reason everyone hates that boost is this: it's way too good in a way that no other boost ever will be in Counter-Strike. There'll never be a boost that could win you a whole half like that without the guy ever being able to stop you or figure it out. And then secondly, it wasn't even for the reasons that everyone was complaining about. So in that scenario, we actually got them on a technicality. And then the last detail is just to tie back into what you said. I cannot abide by how petulant the French were in this scenario. Because there's 2 situations that you take, right? There's only 2 that are acceptable, in my opinion. Once you know, both teams tried to duplicitously use a boost that someone didn't know about to gain an edge. There are 2 outcomes you can do. The match stands. We both used the bug. The result stands. We're not happy with it, but we have to accept it. Or replay the whole match. Let the best man win. One of those 2 is fine, because what's great is they resolve the thing. Instead, LDLC got to benefit from it, even winning a major that, in my opinion, this is what I'm going to use as part of my argument. I don't think they're a team on this list with a major. I don't think should have a major, because they didn't win the match. I even used to, as a friend, jokingly tell them, I don't know why you guys tell me you're the best. You're the only people to ever win a major without winning the fucking 3 maps, the 2 maps in the series. You can't, like, you lost them at a series and won the major. So I just found that angle, that sat so bad with me. So in a way, I have almost the reverse. I come out feeling worse about the French side of it. Like, I feel like they were really fucking childish. And I only believe it's because, here's my problem. I only believe it's because they thought they would lose. If they had been the number 1 team and Fnatic were the ones they beat every time, they just replay that game and you beat them like a drum. There's none of this dispute. So they won't admit it, but that's why I think, here's the problem. Like I said, they'd lost every time. In MBK's mind, it's like, that was my win. Like, I'm not going to do it again. Like, why would I have to start all over, you know?
Yeah. And look, the point I made at the time as well, and again, we probably can debate the merits of this as a viewpoint, and then I'll go to Jason and you can say what you were going to say. But, you know, the point I made at the time was, as soon as you see that boost happen, why doesn't an admin pause the game?
That is weird as well, isn't it? Yeah. Remember, it's even a Valve major, for fuck's sake, dude.
Yeah, Valve should have been there.
They were actually. There was a guy there, but
that was one of the last they were on site for it.
They weren't the sort of guys who were like watching the game though to see what was happening. They were more like they were probably in like a Twitch lounge talking to some business people or something. You know.
But like what? So what happened there was, like, as far as I can tell, is the admin saw what was going on. I mean, it was impossible to ignore. By the way, if anyone's ever watched the VOD, who have Semler's comments, Semler's
hilarious.
Because no one can believe what they're seeing.
Oh no!
And it seems to me you just go right time out here and you just pause.
No. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can time out as an admin to figure it out, because then you're giving time over to LDLC to actually have a conversation and figure out what's going on with the boost. You have to let that play out.
What were you going to say before that point?
Oh, I was gonna say, wasn't one of the things that got Fnatic dinged for that boost? Didn't it mess with the hitboxes as well? I thought that was always an explanation.
You couldn't get a headshot through it.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, because I know
see the head
when Keo eventually finds it out, he actually shoots at him, and it hits like an invisible fucking force field.
You're right. I think you also aren't allowed to be in a spot where it makes you like invulnerable or something. So that might also be. But the point is, again, I don't think that was something that necessarily was like planned with the boost. That's the problem. That's why, to me, the real problem with this situation is there can be no precedent because it's such an anomaly bog. Like I said, there'll never be anything like that ever again. I mean, part of why it only even exists is because what a weird map overpasses that there's a really high part over here that can look into a part down here. Like that doesn't exist in CS generally. You know?
Although, so there's no way somebody comes to a major with some kind of something like that might even like even on some basic level be some kind of an exploit. I wonder if we've had any cases where teams had to like email Valve or the admins and say, hey, we have this, are we allowed to use it? I think the last thing was maybe the Molotov on Vertigo.
That was also part of my problem with that whole narrative. Have you noticed how it's always why didn't Fnatic, just like TSM and Virtus Pro and NIP, why didn't they all just send those? Was anyone sending emails to Valve? If people don't know, this is even the era when Valve never replied, as far as I know. Like, I don't know why people are acting like Valve's on WhatsApp and you hit them up and they're like, yep, check it out now, it's cool. I don't even know if they had that sort of service back then.
Well, famously, this was at the time when there was lots of complaints because there were official forums for pros. In 2014, but they were fucking dead. I mean, like, people weren't replying to them. So, but yeah, I mean, look, for me, I've always just been on, this. I guess it was kind of like, it's a terrible example, so I won't actually go ahead with it. But I was gonna say, I always just felt this was like, I don't know, it's like being the Bolivian football team. Where you've got this unbelievable home record, but it's because no other motherfucker can play at your altitude. Right. It's kind of illegitimate in a way. You're not cheating. You're not doing anything that is sort of outside of the realm of it. But like,
conditions aren't equal.
Yeah, the conditions aren't equal in a way that, for me, Mr. Competitive Integrity, obsessed with it, it felt to me that, like, an admin just has to stop that game and say, you can't use that boost again. And none of us are here having this conversation about what's one of the most controversial things that really overshadows LDLC's legacy. I mean, you're right, Duncan. This is an illegitimate win because of this game. Like, no two ways about it. And it's their major win.
Like, think of this. When we're contrasting even the last two teams where they're, like, great teams that didn't win the major, it's hard to put them against LDLC and go, well, LDLC gets the nod immediately because they won. It's like, yeah, look at the circumstances, mate. Like, that's one of the dodgiest major wins ever because of that, unfortunately. Yeah, it just is,
Chad. Well, I know. Obviously, we're dragging it. I don't want to just make it Boostgate. So again, I just want people to chip in just about the various merits of the team on paper, because end of 2014, the one thing that's in the kind of L column for this team is, sure, they got a major, but they also did seem to be, like you say, behind some of the other teams. So this isn't even the fully turbocharged dominant Fnatic at this point, although they're getting there. They also lost a lot, like a couple of finals, I want to say, like Titan. There's a lot of second places for this team, a lot of semi-finals against like NIP and stuff. And it just felt like, for this roster in particular, until this major, in a way, although there were a few tournament wins before, they had like a star ladder against Na'Vi and stuff. But it always felt like there was always someone that was a little bit better. There was always someone that would stop them. They seemed to choke a lot in a lot of finals.
How would the team look at their day, sort of? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, how do we feel about the team overall, just in terms of skill, and is it a fair characterization?
That's one thing I want to talk about a little bit. First of all, in their day, they were actually akin to, funnily enough, like a Team Liquid 2019 squad. They were a team that was like a bunch of riflers. Remember, there's no like dominant AWPer there. Smiths is the AWPer. Actually, this is, by the way, when he's good still, like Moses was talking about. He has the fucking CZ and the AWP switch. And this is the AWP. I mean, they had the AWP nerfed by them, but even then you could do the CZ swap. And then also, their star player is the fucking IGL. So, like, it's a very unique team. It's a really nice skill distribution. It's why they were able to make all the force spies work. And one angle people don't get, I'll probably one day do like an article or like a documentary on this, because everyone's going to think, you hate Happy, because they never listen to what I say. I was critical of him once his style stopped working, because in my opinion, that style already was abusive. It exploited things about how other people played. So once it doesn't work, the joke I used to have was, instead of you snowballing them, you snowball yourself, because you force spy all the time, you lose all the force spies, you play super aggro, people figure out you're already on the other side of the map. Like, eventually it becomes the most obvious thing. But here's what people don't get. In the same way as I talked before about how someone who might be overrated like Smiths in later years, they earned that by being really good before. So what people don't get is this. Happy famously said in an interview, I broke the meta of Counter-Strike, and he's right. If people don't know, if you go back to before this lineup, the teams that are number one is like, you've got like the Fnatic team, the NIP team, they're just Swedish teams playing with defaults with skilled players who win, and you have like a decent or good IGL who's a mid-round caller. Then you have Very Games, which didn't win the major and tried to do more tactical style. Aside from that, it's not really, if you look in the game, first of all, the total meta of how Counter-Strike's played now isn't totally figured out still. It's still up in the air how you want to play it. A lot of teams actually have just gone like extreme skill and stuff. And what Happy did basically was figure out a way to stack a lot of skill himself and just have like a super decisive style of play. If people don't know, the reason why it was a death ball approach was they either just take the whole site and win, or they die. Like in the fight, that's it. And then Happy cleans up rotations, he gets like flankers and comes in at the last second, wins the clutch. And people don't realize, before it stopped working, it was a mega effective approach, actually. Like, Happy's right, he actually broke the meta. There was a period in time, for real, where you almost used to feel like depressed that they lost the gun round, because you knew their bloody bullshit seeds Ed were coming next, and now they're going to win the round, and you're going to look foolish because they're going to be like 3 people behind the corner that you're trying to peek the angle of. Like, it's a nightmare. So people don't realize this was one of these teams where, like, my analogy would be, they're not the UFC champion, but they're like the contender that, like, if they win, they can just knock you the fuck out. Like, they might lose themselves in the title fight, but tell you what, if you're the other guy, like, I hope I have a good fight, they'll just knock you the fuck out, mate. You'll have all the drool slip out your mouth, like that thing where you can't even speak properly. Like, they were, like, for example, go ask the NIP guys. The NIP guys were having nightmares about these guys. They used to just murder them completely. The joke
This is the team that we called LDLCZ, right?
Yes.
Like, we just created the entire fucking meme around them, yeah.
Exactly. That's like, pretty sweet. Fnatic were good with it as well, but they were just even better. They were just the best with it. Like, every player it fit. And it fit this, like, super low eco style of play. It just made it effective. So I actually think people don't give them their due. Like, in that style, they were one of the progenitors of it. They were really good at it. And they were also, by the way, as much as they didn't win as much, man, live, the fucking ceiling on the base on this team is amazing, though. Like, if people don't remember, the first 14 lands in a row, they made top 4. Those included multiple majors.
I'll bring Chad in for this, because this might be a controversial statement. Then we'll definitely get on to phase, time allowing. For me, this LDLC team, I never rated Happy as an IGL, and this is him at the peak of his powers. And I think he might be one of the worst IGLs to win a major. I've never thought he was good tactically.
As an IGL, obviously not like as a player.
Yeah, exactly. Not as a player or anything like that. He was just the classic like meme IGL from matchmaking. 4 of you go to A and I will be outside of B. Like, he's just that guy.
He almost was doing the fucking meme Alexi D thing of like, I said go A this time, we'll go B. He almost was on that level.
Yeah.
It was working,
so Chad, is that harsh?
I immediately default to like if it's working, if they're winning, but in terms of what he brought to the team in terms of a strategical approach, I wouldn't put him up there with the greats by any means in terms of like the utility usage or even just general approach. It was like we were talking about so far. It was very brute forcey, being able to be aggressive with a lot of very competent riflers. That floor being high meant that I think they had 4 players that year in the top 20 of HLTV's.
Makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So, right, if you've got 4 players who are competently throughout the entire year having ratings to be in the top 20, then you have very strong individuals, right? So I didn't like the way he in-game led. I thought it was like, I hate it. It just seemed very selfish. Whereas like an in-game leader to me is normally the other way. It's like the most selfless member on the entire team. Yes. So I already have my grievances with that from the beginning, but then I default back to, but it was working. But if we were just thinking of the way that he approached the game and what he was able to do with the team and their nuanced approach and strategies and tactics, I don't know if I would put him up there as one of the greats in that regard. So yeah, I wouldn't say you're too far off base by any means.
Right then, well, let's talk about the other team. I'll bring, just jump in, whoever wants to go for this. Obviously, we've got 2018 phase. Yeah, I mean, well, and I say 2018 phase, it's sort of a little bit before as well. But basically, the one that lost the ring at Boston, famously with
the most obvious missing ring of all time.
Yeah, totally. And it was a roster that there sort of wasn't a roster like it kind of assembled ever. It
still looks amazing when you look back now on paper.
Carrigan is the IGL.
You still look back now and go, they did win that major. Sure.
He had Nico, Guardian, and Olofmeister, and it was one of the most exciting teams when it was announced and assembled, and all the various parts were put together. So again, anyone who wants to jump in, tell me about this phase team and why it's a time traveler.
Duncan, you and I did this New York event, didn't we? I was just gonna.
We did the first event. Yeah,
that New York event, and that event was just like watching this team school everybody. They were just like, it was single-digit wins all the time.
Do you remember, Chad?
Everybody.
Just as a piece of trivia, do you remember what the predictions were for the final on that one?
No.
Because even though, you have to understand, even though FaZe was tearing this lad up with some of the craziest numbers, like Chad's saying, they were beating everyone like 16-7. They would win both the pistols. If they lost a gun round, they would just win the force buy. Nico was having like historic numbers. Guardian was going off. Rain was going off. Like every factor said FaZe was going to win. But the problem is, because on the other side of the bracket, Team Liquid was doing pretty well. And they just beat SK. Like I did one of those things you do as an analyst, which is the classic trap. And it's not that you actually think the underdog will win. You just find a way they could. So you figure out, like, well, they could maybe actually, the way the map pool's loaded, like, FaZe's 3 best maps are at the beginning, and would they win 3 in a row? They probably lose 1, right? So if they lose 1, then suddenly we're on to, like, maybe then we're playing, like, fucking whatever's in the map pool then, train or something like. And so basically, I did actually predict that Team Liquid. You can go back on the VOD. I did predict the Team Liquid would win the final, and then they obviously just 3-0'd. And
I'll read the results.
And I was heartbroken.
I'll read the results.
All I'm saying this, boys, is I'm such a hipster. I was calling Team Liquid to win finals in 2017 because they were losing. So
I'll read the results from that event just so everyone gets it. 2017. This is 2017 IEM New York. ESL1 it was. Sorry, I always get the brandings mixed up. My bad. But anyway, so FaZe beat in the groups. These were best of ones. VP, they beat them 16-5. Then Astralis, they beat them 16-6. They go into the semis. They play Cloud9. They beat Cloud9 16-4, 16-3. They go to the final. They're playing against Team Liquid. They beat them 16-3, 16-14, 16-4. So they only had like one opponent's map where the opponent got into double figures against them. Just absolute, like, as dominant a performance as you can realistically have, and a 3-0 in a best-of-5 final. So this was when people really stood up and took notice, because it looked like this team was just going to be just an unstoppable force.
I mean, the funny thing is, I even had the same vibe at the time of like what I just said about like the LDLC team. I was like, if this team actually is going to be number 1, doesn't it just break counterstrike? Like, how the fuck do you recruit after this? How do you even build a team? Like, for a start off, I was even thinking to myself, how do you convince like a normal player to want to be a support player if their support players are Rain and Olofmeister? Like I actually low key like. Now I look back where, because of Nico and Carrigan, etc., not getting the major, I think it's tragic. At the time, I actually low-key sort of pulled against this team. I actually was scared it might like ruin Counter-Strike on some level,
Yeah.
And obviously, people don't know, especially if you come from Europe, it had that whole vibe of like the fucking Real Madrid Galacticos thing of like just stack all the best. Which, if you're an analyst in general, you always want to be against that, because sadly it just makes fans who are not really knowledgeable about the game think that you can just build teams like that all the time. Like, you still see it to this day. They still want to remove like, I don't know, fucking. Like, I don't know, like Perfecto out of Navi and put like bloody like Axile in there, some like, like some stupid move that makes no sense. But like, that was the terror to me. Like, I remember initially thinking, like, are they just going to win everything?
Yeah, but thank God it was all bluster. Like it did. Like, I think by 2018, I think that major broke them. I think the problem with this team for me is that I can only really. When I think of this FaZe roster that formed, I think that ESL1 New York run in 2017 was probably one of the best tournament runs we'll ever see from a team in all of Counter-Strike. I can't imagine there's many better runs from
honeymoon ever.
But if you go and look at the long term of this lineup and of this team, and you go look at 2018, obviously the Boston major is what sticks out the most as like a heartbreaking lost in the finals. But look at the events they won there. They won Sydney with Exist as a stand-in in the roster, and they won Belo Horizonte with what's his face that we haven't seen since Croman. Like some of their biggest wins later on in this lifetime's period are without the actual super team lineup, which is like, it is very weird. Like this lineup, I remember thinking throughout its like lifespan, obviously super dangerous, super deadly, but it seemed like it had that great honeymoon period, as we all knew they would, because every team that's based on an individual skill has an incredible honeymoon period, and then it just fell flat, and they weren't able to really put the pieces together in my mind, despite all the skill, despite all the elements, despite all the versatility, despite having the best players at their respective roles for the previous 3 years. It never felt like this team fully came together.
I think that they got mentally broken by that major though, right? Like, Boston, and then they went on to the face major, and that's when, like, I think NiKo usurped Carrigan, right? Because I'm standing there and I can hear through these fucking barricades. I'm like, you know what? The camp over there in FaZe doesn't look so good, so let's go be a little snoopy bitch. They have to communicate in English and listen to who's calling, right? And that's where you identified that Carrigan wasn't talking at all. And what happens when you're an in-game leader like that and the trust goes? You feel fucking useless because you know you're not there to pop heads. Like, I'm not here to pop heads. I'm here to get a kill every other round and to set the rest of you motherfuckers up for the majority of this. And as soon as they lose trust in your word, it's GG. It's fucking it. Like, that's the story of this. I think I just want to go back to this New York one here, just so we can really see how dominant this was, though. And I know this is, what are we talking, maybe 7 months on from it, but they beat, in that group stage, VP and Astralis. Those two teams at the start of the year were playing against each other in the grand final of the E-League major.
Yeah, and then, by the way, Astralis was still a top 4 team. They were still good at the time. Yeah,
and then they went to just absolutely hide the Cloud9 that less than 6
months
major, later went on to win the major. That being the 3 teams, that's fucking mental right there. And the fact that they were all hiding, like, across those games, what are we talking? 18 rounds total across 3 different teams. I know 2 best of 1s and a best of 3, but still, that is
what do you think? What do you think went wrong, though? Because, like, this narrative that they were mentally broken by the Boston major, sure, there's aspects to it, but I mean, they didn't dominate the back end of 2017 either.
I've got an angle on this. Basically, the problem is a larger one. It's actually something that, if you look in his career at that point in time, had been a problem for Carrigan. His team would always do this. They'd lose the giant event, like the major or like the massive Katowice type event, and then they would beat the exact same teams at a smaller event, win it. So in your mind, you're like, well, then they could be the best, but they just wouldn't get the big event. So if you remember, it wasn't just the Boston major. The first one people forget was when they ran into their first problem. They played Pro League and they played SK. This was the end of the SK Bolts lineup being really good. SK beat them 3-1, best of 5. Then they have the major. They lose the major after being on 15-11 map points. Then they have, before that, sorry, there was the fucking Auckland one where they lost the best of 5 to Nip, the underdog. Then they have the Katowice one after the major where you're in the final, you play this Fnatic squad who's like, remember, that was the one where I had fucking gold and people were like, this team isn't going anywhere. They beat you in the best of 5. It was even the one where no one remembers. Map 5 was Train, and Olofboost literally gets 4-3'd. He gets aspect ratios when Flusher sneaks by the side of his screen, and if you watch it on 4-3, you don't see him. On 16-9, you see a little arm go by. So that actually costs him the whole tournament. So if you think about it, this is why, Richard could confirm this, I've never actually said NiKo was totally wrong to kick Carrigan. Because the problem is, if I'm NiKo, and I'm like, right, so I'm like, at this point in time, I might be the best player in the world, right? I'm the best player in the world. Ignore what I might have done myself in finals. But my IGL's lost all the big finals we've been in, and we're losing all the best of 5s, mate. Even worse, we're a favourite in every single one except the SK one. Like, in the other ones, we're massive favourites. We're playing Nip, fucking Cloud9 and Fnatic. Like, these aren't the elite teams at the time. So if you are NiKo, I can sort of see why you're like, someone's got to change. I can't just keep doing this like 5 times in a row or whatever. But the problem with that is, like, it's like every scenario. It's like, but what are you changing for? Like, there wasn't like, it's not like Glaive was like, well, I'll join. Like, there wasn't like the fucking obvious alternative. So I can definitely see the knock on this team. They like, the real problem this team have is this. They were like this close to like being like fucking top 5 on our list or something. But the problem is the key, they're one of those teams where like there's maybe like 10 rounds total that if you give them the win on 10 rounds, they might be like an era. It would be amazing. But all the big ones they lost. And if you lose all the big ones, it's like I said about Team Liquid with the major. It will be a knock, of course, because the problem is this is the best teams of all time. The team that you're being shadowed against probably did win the major. So that has to be some of the metrics we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
There has to be an element as well of like when that downfall that I have to imagine there has to be an element of like individual decay in terms of how effective you are as a player, especially if like you're not keeping up. And you have to think at the time Olaf had been, obviously kind of a shadow of his glory days in 2015, but that's always going to be a steady decline to a certain degree. And obviously he had a good amount of longevity. Guardian as well wasn't nearly at his peak despite how dangerous he'd been previously. Still very dangerous and very deadly, but not quite there. And as we've seen as time has gone on, the knock on him is not being able to keep up with the individual meta and not working hard enough to keep up within the game. And I don't think, for me personally, I don't know if I've seen someone go from like legend to just not involved in the scene in any way as Guardian. Like that happened quick. Like he just wasn't sought after. So I mean, there's got to be elements of that as well when you look at some of these players, because yeah, super team for their potential at the time, but a year down the road, 2 years down the road, with these losses mounting up as well, I have to imagine that the work ethic and the motivation to constantly stay on top of things, it's all speculation, I should say, probably wasn't there the same way it was when this team formed.
Yeah, and look, sorry, go on, Chad.
I was just going to say, in 2017, as per the HLTV awards for the top 20 players, Nico was number 2 that year, Rain was number 4, Guardian was number 9, and Olaf still snuck in to the top 20 at 19. So they had another, this is the same as what we were just saying with that LDLC roster. They had 4 players, but these 3, Guardian, Rain, and Nico, were much deeper in that than any of the guys that we were talking about on the others. I know we're not comparing resumes just yet, but like these individuals at that time in 2017 were like some of the absolute best, if not the best, that you could put in those roles and positions. And if the knock is Carrigan not having completed whatever he needed to learn as an in-game leader at that time, then obviously that's a massive component of all this. But individually speaking, in 2017, these guys were absolute fucking monsters.
Oh, it is, to be fair, it is also worth just pointing out, there is no other team on this list that is a totally international squad with people speaking a second language that won a major in all the era. Like, so he was trying to do something no one has ever done. I have to say that, because that, in some ways, in my opinion, even getting on this list is a success. Bear in mind, as I say, like, it's a totally unique experiment, isn't it? Like, as much as we're given the upside of all the super duper talents, they are also speaking like second language, different culture, thrown in the mix of like teams without not even an obvious structure with those players,
I was going to say, just to bring it up, since I brought up this idea of individual decay, Nico, Guardian, and Olaf are also in the top 20 of 2018 the following year as well. So those guys obviously kept it up for the next year too.
I mean, so look, my take on the FaZe team, and this was sort of where I was at coming in, is I think it's the biggest underachieving team we've ever had in CSGO. Like, yes. I really believe it. I look at the fact that, first of all, for the purposes of time travel, LAN, as you guys already mentioned, 2 of their tournament wins are done with stand-ins. It's questionable as to whether you can include those. And I know there's mitigating circumstances. Like Boston, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Like, I mean, when you understand like where that run Cloud9 had at that major is like ridiculous. To turn that game around on its head is ridiculous. But also a bad call, an implosion, a lack of composure. There was this thing with this team where I feel that, and it's not really talked about a lot, there was like this roster had people that were fantastic players, but all flawed in some sort of like fundamental way, with the exception of Rain, who's just Mr. Stoic. I'll just do whatever the team needs, whatever it wants me to. I'll play any role. Yeah, and like Guardian, of course, like he was a bit of a train wreck mentally because he was staring into the abyss of never getting a major. Was meant to get it with FaZe for real. I mean, you were already meant to get one with Na'Vi. It didn't work out okay. But when you join FaZe and you come to this major and you're in a final, you were definitely meant to get it. Nico, we know what he's like, very fractious. There was already, I was at this event. There was already problems in that relationship, in Boston that were prevalent. And I'm sure they certainly played a factor in the final. Then obviously Olofmeister coming out the back of this, he's had this like tenured career, but yeah, people were already starting to whisper, is he going to be able to hack it? And then obviously he had all the personal problems that snowballed through the rest of the year. Where I'm out on the team is by London in 2018, because this, like, people don't seem to talk about this. they went to the Face It major, which was a fucking train wreck, worst major of all time, tech problems and all sorts overshadowing it. But if you go look at the results that the FaZe team had there, you know, they got battered by Big in their opening game. These are best of ones, obviously, with the system. They lost to Na'Vi in the next game, so they're already digging deep to get through. You know, they beat Mouse. They got blessed by having Ty Lue up next. And then they played a series against G2 where, you know, they had like some 25-22 win on like Dust 2. And then they just got 2-0'd by Astralis, which, by the way, is a hallmark of a Carrigan team. Carrigan's meant to do a number on his old boys. That's been something he's historically done in his career. Didn't get it. So they went out like 5th to 8th in their sort of comeback major. No, I think they're a very insipid team, honestly, when you look at the firepower that they had. Too many second places, too many semi-finals. And for me, they started out... The team is characterized by its honeymoon period. It was all one long honeymoon period.
That's why, by the way, if people are European soccer fans, I'm not a huge fan, but this was my era. That's why they even are the perfect comparison to the Galacticos Real Madrid. Yeah. Because if people don't know, that team is an insane underachiever. They only won the odd cup here and there, like one La Liga or some bullshit, wasn't it? Like they didn't even win the European Cup, and they had the same scenario. Because if this is the insane thing, people forget about this lineup, right? On paper, here's who you had. You had Nico, top 2 player in the world at one point in time, probably at this time. Guardian had been a top 2 player in the world at one point in time. Olofboost is like this again. This is like a fan in the same way as, if people don't know, that Real Madrid team was like fucking like Zidane with Ronaldo with Figo. Like, you're supposed to have one of those players that the whole team built around them. It's like they had 3 in 1. So it's also, in some ways, by the way, to loop it back to the beginning of the convo, in some ways, as much as it's tragic for the individual narratives of those players, especially the ones that never got the major, in some ways, I do think it's almost like right that they didn't win, though. I don't think that is how you should build in Counter-Strike. I think essentially, I even think personally, they sort of baited some other squads, because I saw a lot of other teams do international teams without a Carrigan. And I'm like, you're missing the point completely here, boys. Like, you only have the fraggers. That ain't going to get it done. It's also beautiful if you think about it, that their era, what their attempted era, was followed by the real Astralis era, who brought back tactical Counter-Strike, utility, players that fit their roles. I'd even argue, here's the contrast. Even though the stats, because Astralis won every bloody game seemingly, and they were all overinflated, I know the stats are going to say the Astralis players were better, Chad. On paper, the fucking FaZe Clan lineup's way better than the Astralis lineup. Just that's Counter-Strike. It's a team game, isn't it? That's the power of a unit.
Yeah, you could even maybe make an argument for like these guys being so good, right? And everybody being worried about that style of Counter-Strike, if you just that it could have helped them refine this utility. What do these guys do? What positions do these guys take that are so good that we can just start dumping our nades and be a lot more clinical? Because that's what the Astralis era ended up being, right? Precision utility, understanding the way that these guys rotate and float around the map, and then punishing all of that on top. Like, that was it. Just having really good theory against really good aimers. So I look. This FaZe roster, I know the resume that we're touting here doesn't look great, but in terms of the players on the team, right, and where we're at in the bracket right now, fucking hell. Are we at the casting a vote point yet, Richard? Can I?
Well, I'll get one more point from Jason, and then.
I'm good. I'm ready to cast a vote. I don't have more points. Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, well, let's do it then.
Back to you in the studio, Chad.
Yeah, back here's Tom with the weather. I'll look, I guess I've got to go first. This is probably going to be the hardest vote that I'm going to cast. My opinion, sort of coming into it, was that I sort of in my mind believed that LDLC sort of had a bit more kind of consistency to them, even though I think they were a better team than they were a better group of individuals, if you know what I mean. There's that individuals in LDLC that I don't rate at all. They got a major in absolutely wild circumstances, which is the sort of inverse to FaZe losing a major in absolutely wild circumstances. And I think there's no way, if you actually put these two teams on a server together, I don't think there's any way you could argue that anyone other than FaZe should win. However, within the context of what we're doing for this project and within the context of the tournament, I think I probably got to go LDLC. I didn't think I was going to. I was kind of like, I'm very back and forth on it. But, won a major.
As you said, nearly all the wins are with the stand-ins.
Yeah, and
On
you know,
their
when
side, that is,
I take the stand-in wins away from FaZe, and suddenly it's not a very impressive record at all. So it's that's more a W for Carrigan than it is for the FaZe legacy. So for me, yeah, I'll take LDLC.
Mine's gonna be short and sweet, boys. The tiers, they're not gonna buy a win here. They're look, for me, I'm gonna go with FaZe. I just think like pound for pound, player for player. Even if the trophy cabinet's not as stacked, I think this FaZe roster would give him a bit of a hiding. So I'm gonna give FaZe my thumbs up.
I'm just gonna clarify something because now I'm a bit confused, right? Since they're not ever actually going to play, are we supposed to actually be shadowboxing them directly playing each other? Because I'm more doing it like who truly is the more greater team, and like because obviously I know they can't play it. So like
we never
are we supposed to?
I think we were bringing in a bit of both, right? Because
the problem is this: if we're doing shadowboxing them actually playing, I'm with Chad. I'd have to take FaZe even if they didn't win. But if we're going like who was technically the greater team, I feel like that I'll lean slightly to LDLC on that one. So how are we doing this?
Well, I mean, look,
however you want, baby.
Yeah, however you want. It's your criteria. When it comes to the vote, the reasons why you vote are sacred, as I am told by Twitch political commentators. I
think
American politicians.
This is actually, I mean, I know obviously it should be because we're going through the seeds from one onward, but this is actually one of the hardest ones I think we're going to have in this whole bracket. I think genuinely, like, you can go either way. Like I say, with the case like LDLC won more, then again, their major I think is actually invalid. I mean, the joke is this: FaZe Clan was 1 round from winning a major that I actually think is more impressive than LDLC winning a major. So already you've got an interesting one there, right? Like FaZe Clan. In fact, I even always think, by the way, I think when people meme on the FaZe Clan one, beyond people just making fun or who are Cloud9 fans, I even think people are really unreasonable about that one. Because here's the problem: they only ever take when you're at the map point when you're 15-11 up. What they've always forget is this: it was like 13-7 at one point in that game. 13-7 and you're on T-side Inferno. Like, that is an example of a game where any pro will tell you this. You want to go, no, do my due diligence with it. You know you've won that game. Chad, if you're 13-7 up on the third map, team you've never lost to ever, you're on T-side Inferno, you have to only win 3 rounds out of the next, like, fucking 10. In your mind, you've won this game. Even if I lose this next round, I'm winning the game. Even if I fuck up this force play, I'm winning the game still. Like, you almost feel like inevitably you're going to be pushed over the line. Like, that's actually, in my opinion, one of the most actual reasonable, like, chokes.
That's how you fall into complacence and get fucking ass beat.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. It is.
That NA mindset.
Exactly. But anyway, yeah, what I'll say, I think overall then, I'm going more towards like the greatness of the team overall. So fuck, which one do I do for this one? now he's brought in the doubt, hasn't he?
It's all right. You're definitely gonna get.
Actually, you know what? I'm gonna say fuck it. I'm gonna go with FaZe Clan as well. I'm gonna say FaZe Clan. They're the better team overall, in my opinion.
Ooh.
Even though I acknowledge the resume is better for the resume is better for Envy. I acknowledge.
Right, cheers.
I actually,
And if you're happy, by the way, I am just a hater, obviously. I accept it. I acknowledge it. I'm obviously just a hater at this point. It's fine.
If this was a little bit later on in our time travel bracket, if this was like the semifinals or the grand finals, I would have gone with LDLC. But seeing as the quarterfinals, FaZe is still at a very nice place. They're still peaking. They're still having a good time with that. I'm going with FaZe as well. I actually think, in my mind, I actually don't really enjoy. I remember I didn't really enjoy watching LDLC back in the day. I hated the death ball. I hated the 4-1 shit. I hated the lurking star player. I thought it was incredibly boring. I hated their style and overpass dunk, and you mentioned it. You could just sit back in that bomb site. They were the ones who really showed that off throughout that DreamHack major. I hated everything about that, although liking some of the individual players. And same with FaZe. I've never been a huge fan of super teams. Every time I see super teams forms, I just generally don't really enjoy them to that extent. And this one was just incredibly disappointing. But God, I remember when they formed and watching them play, some of the games when it clicked, it was just magical. You'd be like, what are teams supposed to do against the CT side? You go here and there's Olofmeister and Rain. You go to the other side of the map and you've got Guardian with an AWP. How do you play this map? How do you play the map against this team? So I'm gonna go with FaZe in this matchup. But I mean, I think obviously they had some real fucking issues of winning the big game. And when we get to the big games and when we get later on in our time travel bracket, I most certainly am going to make sure that they get their ass kicked for that tendency to just kind of drop the ball.
Right. Well,
that
means FaZe Clan win. Just a little glimpse for you, Jason. They will be taking on the winner of 2017 Astralis versus 2021 Na'Vi. So, just, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is also, by the way, where if you're a pro, like, I genuinely hope you don't watch the context. Imagine tuning into this, like, what we got on that list? Oh, they say we're better than the team who won the major. I have to close this down. Like, I can't bother with this shit. Fuck this. Fuck. Facing out the window, you know. Like.
So look, I think we can put a pin in it and wrap this session up, and then we'll do the remaining 2 games from this bracket next time we get together, which might be in a post-Major World schedule, depending. But there you go, guys. That was Time Travel LAN. Hope you enjoyed it. Tell us what you think below. Post it on social media. Drive the debate.
Richard. Tweet it directly at Richard. All your thoughts, all your opinions.
Definitely. Maybe my DMs are open. Send me vitriolic abuse. Tell me to kill myself. All the usual, you know.
Also, any suggestions on editing? If you don't like the full screen one-person picture, if you like to see reactions to different people, make sure you send that all over to Richard's inbox.
Any suggestions on suicide methods? Send them to me. You know, I go back and forth myself about how it's going to end.
Reminds me of a game we used to play in the green room. How would you do it in this room?
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, it's going to have to be a gun, Moses. It's going to have to be a gun. But anyway, yeah, look, thanks so much for your time as well, guys. Really appreciate it. Hope you all enjoyed the show. And we'll see you in a little bit with more Time Travel LAN.